So, what is GiveCamp? GiveCamp is a weekend-long event where nonprofits, where developers and graphic designers and other volunteers get together and develop software solutions for nonprofits over one weekend. We start on Friday afternoon and go through Sunday afternoon to develop some kind of software solutions. This year it's going to be October 19th to the 21st. Every year we've done this. We've done it at the Miami University Voice of America Learning Center down in Westchester, right off of Interstate 75, so it's convenient for people both in the Cincinnati and the Dayton area. This is Southwest Ohio GiveCamp. It started 8 years ago. This will be the 9th GiveCamp. And we did it in that location to combine both Dayton and Cincinnati together because everyone was interested in doing it, and we thought we could help more people out and get more volunteers at that time. If you have any questions, go ahead and type them in comments. We'll address questions as we go. This is, like I said, is our 8th year of GiveCamp. In those 8 years, we've supported 92 nonprofit projects, each one valued approximately $10,000 to $15,000. Our approximate total value is about $1.3 million that we've provided to these communities and nonprofits over those years. To help us with that, we've had over 550 volunteers volunteer over 14,250 hours of time in those weekends alone. That doesn't account some of the time spent ahead of time to help in their nonprofits calculate requirements and things like that. So if you're a nonprofit, you might know what kind of projects can you guys do in a weekend sort of thing, and that's a question we get quite often. One of the most common projects we have is redoing a website for a nonprofit, because often websites are outdated. Like this is an example of the Dan Beard Eagle Scout Council project. Joe Combs was the nonprofit at that time, and he actually enjoyed what we did so much he has joined our organizer group. So on the top left corner is their before picture of what their website looked like before we worked on it for one weekend, and the bottom right corner is their after picture. So this is one of the most common things we do because it's easy to get something accomplished and a finished product over the weekend. Every year we also do 1 or 2 mobile applications, both for iPhone and Android usually. I note that only 1 or 2 of these we do every year. We always get lots of applications for them because everybody wants them and that's what's popular. But it's harder to get selected if you pick one of these projects because it's a more specialized skill set and it's harder to get people to be able to volunteer and do these. In addition, we also do usually up to 5 different type web application database sort of things. This is an example of a inventory tracking system we did for Mason Food Pantry. Before their system, their before picture was all paper tracking system. They had some spreadsheets and things like that, but it was mainly paper tracking. So we made an online inventory system for them to track throughout the weekend, or it took them over the weekend. This is one project that we did a little bit of work afterwards to help clean up. Some of these more complicated ones, sometimes things get cleaned up a little bit after the weekend, but the goal is always to get it accomplished over the weekend. So you might be asking, oh, I'm already excited. Where are my projects? I want to do something. If you go to the website, which is southwestohiogivecamp.org, and you look under the nonprofit menu, there's a nonprofit sign up. And we'll go over the process of how that works here in a little bit. The first submission is just a simple form on that website. The simple form outlines what the project is, what your nonprofit's mission is, asks for your tax exempt status, etc., sort of thing. About 5 fields, contact information. We take a look at that and make sure the mission fits as far as things that we do, location, etc. Mainly, the main thing we're looking for in that first submission is the scope of your project. Is it going to be way too big for us to do over a weekend? Because if it is, we're not going to waste your time or our time going further in the process. Once you've met that initial selection criteria, we submit out usually Word documents to send in a detailed proposal. That detailed proposal is evaluated by committee members for the nonprofit committee. It's usually 2 people evaluate every proposal, and they evaluate it on these 5 categories. The highest one being feasibility and scope of can we get you some kind of viable product over the weekend. Second being impact on Southwest Ohio. We have done a couple projects before for nonprofits that were located in Southwest Ohio but didn't necessarily benefit Southwest Ohio, but we want to help most the people that are located and benefit Southwest Ohio. So just if you don't fit in that category, it's not a reason that you can't do it, but we have done them before, but that's what we prefer. Next one is impact and charity needs. So do they already have some kind of solution that works, or say they don't even have a website at all, they're a brand new nonprofit, they need a website to get going. That's the impact and charity need factor sort of thing. And cooperation of the charity. We have found over the years that the more involved and available the charity is, the more successful the project is. So if they say I can show up for the opening ceremonies, the closing ceremonies, and I might only be available by phone by the weekend, that's going to score lower than someone said we will make sure we have someone sitting there all weekend with the team to be able to help and answer questions. The last thing is interest to volunteers. Obviously, some projects are more interesting to volunteers and some are than others. So a website rebuild isn't necessarily as interesting to some volunteers as a web application database or a iPhone and Android application sort of thing. So those might score higher. We get new volunteers every year. We lose some volunteers every year. We want to make sure we pick projects that are interesting so we can continue to do this because we're dependent on the volunteers to do the projects. So what happens before GiveCamp? We're in this cycle now. GiveCamp, like I said, is usually in October. November, December, January, February, we don't do a whole lot. We usually start to open up the nonprofit that first phase in February, start gathering submissions. The first phase application is due this year, August 1st. The second phase application is due this year, August 10th. So you need to get your applications in before then. We try to get them all scored and selected by the 1st of September. So that way it gives a little over a month, about 6 weeks or so, for us to assign team leads, which each project is assigned a team lead that works directly with the nonprofit about 6 weeks before, a month to 6 weeks before GiveCamp, to finalize the requirements, start to develop a plan. So when the other volunteers get there that first night, they can get rolling. So who volunteers at GiveCamp? Who are you going to help? Who's going to help us? Mainly it's developers, and more developers. We have some database people. One of the hardest things, but most critical things to what we do are designers, both website designers, application designers, graphic artists, because one of the big things we can do for people is make things look better. Not many organizations have that inherently in their own organization, so we can bring that expertise to it. What we're trying to do more of, especially this year, is involve project managers more. We've had a few issues in the past where our tech lead is a technical lead, and they get involved and down in the weeds, and it's hard for them to pull away from that and look at the bigger picture of how things are going for the weekend. So we're going to try to partner up more project managers with the teams this year to try to help steer things and make things stay on course. What happens at GiveCamp? So we start out Friday evening. We have opening ceremonies where all the volunteers get together, and the opening ceremonies starts out, and that is where the nonprofits showcase who they are and what they want us to accomplish over the weekend. Immediately following opening ceremonies, we have team selection. So we already had the team lead selected, but then we go back through and all the other volunteers pick which projects they want to be on. And sometimes we have to do some shuffling around to even out the teams and get the necessary personnel involved in each project that we need. But that all happens. Then immediately we go out of the auditorium, we go get food, and we get to work. We start to develop Kanban boards and other things, and people start developing. And then one of the key things we've found that's been successful is we have required stand-ups with all of the team lead. It gets less frequent throughout the weekend. It starts out every 3-4 hours or so. And we meet with them and figure out what issues they have so we can reallocate resources from one team to another, help with problems. If we know someone that's an expert in that area, they can come help. And that kind of keeps everybody's project keeps moving and sharing things across the different projects. Then we work all night, Friday night if you want to. Mine is open all night Friday night. Saturday morning, a lot of times, sometimes we've had groups come in and provide pancake breakfast for us. Engage, a company in Cincinnati, has been very good to us over the years, both donations, and they like to come provide breakfast for us. The majority of the day on Saturday is continuing to work. We work all day. We always have a group picture that we take around noon on Saturday. And then we try to make it a family affair at times too. Last probably 4 years or so, we have done hour of code for kids. So we have the volunteers who are giving up the weekend. It's always fun for them to have their kids come in and see what they're doing. And then we'll teach them some about coding and software development stuff for about an hour, so that way they can learn and possibly be future volunteers at GiveCamp. Sunday morning, by this point, most things should be close to and done. It should be kind of final polish and things like that. The most important thing that happens Sunday morning is training. Every project is required to train their volunteer or their nonprofit on Sunday morning to let them know how to maintain, use, etc. the product we're giving them. Because if we just hand it over to them and they don't get any kind of training, it's not going to be valuable for them in the future. We have to make sure what we provide them continues to be used. Then after everything gets wrapped up, we switch over to closing ceremonies, where closing ceremonies was opening ceremonies were primarily about the nonprofits. Closing ceremonies is primarily about the projects and the team. So this time the team lead takes over, and the team lead shows what they accomplished over the weekend and the project they did. And everyone gets to see all the hard work everyone did over the weekend. So that's what happens at GiveCamp. Some of you may wonder what happens after GiveCamp. The unofficial rule we use, we call it the Vegas rule, is what happens at GiveCamp stays at GiveCamp. Meaning you are volunteering your time for that weekend. We are not requiring you to be tech support forever and ever for this nonprofit you're volunteering for. Many volunteers choose on their own to help the nonprofits after GiveCamp, help get things implemented, answer questions in the future, etc. We like that, but that's a bonus. That's not something that we require out of our volunteers. Excuse me. What is expected out of a nonprofit? Most importantly, participate throughout the process. The more participation we have from nonprofits, the better it is. The more successful the project is. Next thing would be provide clear requirements in your application. I know you don't understand all the technical aspects and everything like that, but we need to know enough in your application to be able to score it. Sometimes, which I didn't have listed before, there's a third step in that application. If we aren't clear on things, we may call the nonprofit and have a 10 or 15 minute phone call to clarify the scope and actual process of the project. Number 3, this is just as important as anything else, work with your team lead in the weeks leading up to the event. That's where the foundation is set. That's where the requirements are gathered. That's where a lot of times the technology is determined that's going to be used for these projects. And so the more the team lead understands up front, the better your project, the more successful your project is going to be. Every nonprofit is required to have a representative speak about their nonprofit during the opening ceremonies. So a representative comes up. They usually have about 4 minutes, and they talk about their mission and talk about their organization and what they do in order to help inspire the volunteers to want to do their project and work for them. And then they talk a little about what they want to accomplish. And usually about 30 seconds or so, the team lead will come up and say what technologies and what type of volunteers they need, so that way we make sure we get the right people on the teams. I mentioned this earlier. I've mentioned it several times because it's extremely important. Have someone available throughout the event to answer questions. By available, the preferred method is to be there, be at the event as much as possible to answer questions. We know sometimes there's things sometimes you have to leave and go elsewhere, etc., but at least have a phone number for someone we can go out to and reach questions, because when we're doing a tight schedule from Friday roughly 7:30 starting development to Sunday roughly 2 o'clock stopping development, that's not a lot of time to get things done. If we have to wait for an hour or 2 hours to get an answer to a question, that sets things back a lot. And then I mentioned the training. Any interested nonprofits should be available for training on Sunday mornings. That will make sure your project is successful going forward. And finally, attend the closing ceremonies. It's interesting not only to see what was done with your project, what the team did, which you should already know because you were there all weekend, but it's interesting to see what other projects that were done for other nonprofits. Quite often we'll have nonprofits come back with a proposal a year or two after they were there in order to bring up and say, hey, I saw this done a couple years ago. Can we do something similar to this for my nonprofit sort of thing? So it helps them out and gives you ideas for things you can do in the future. So that's what I have for presentation. Let's switch over and see what kind of questions everybody has. So, what questions do people have? If there's no questions, we'll end early. Thank you everyone for attending. If there's other people you think will benefit from the video, you can let them know that it should be up on our Facebook page, and I'll also probably post it to the YouTube page as well. All right. So, all the nonprofits out there, please go out and apply now for your projects. We only have about 7 projects in right now. We typically do 10 to 14 depending on how many volunteers we do, so there's plenty of room to get more projects. A lot of times we have 20 to 30 projects apply, so we have to be able to sort those out and figure out who's going to do the projects this year. So, last call for any comments. Thank you, everybody.